Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Game Things. I'm your host for the week, Ming, and today we're starting off our episode by talking about Street Fighter 6. So Street Fighter 6 recently just released their demo, which is now available on PC, Xbox Series S and X, PS4, as well as PS5. Throughout the demo, players will be able to play a portion of World Tour as well as various modes in Fighting Ground. So the World Tour mode is something new to the Street Fighter 6 series, and basically what it does is a somewhat like a single player type of game where you can create your custom character and you can interact with all sorts of characters. Basically think of it as a open world type of game, but the combat is obviously all Street Fighter style. I personally think it looks pretty good and looks pretty interesting. You can create your own character, you can customize the way your character fights, and players that are actually looking to try out something new, I would say that Street Fighter 6 World Tour mode, maybe give it a shot, especially since it's available in the demo that is currently available to try out. Aside from that, they have also announced the first year DLC characters. The DLC characters will include Rashid, Aki, Ed, as well as Akuma, and all these characters will be available in the fall of 2023. Next, we're gonna talk about a couple of Ubisoft games that are being released on Steam later this year, starting with Far Cry 6, which will be releasing on the 11th of May. Then we have Riders Republic, which is coming out on the 8th of June. Then we have Rainbow Six Extraction coming out on the 15th of June. And lastly, we have Monopoly Madness coming on the 22nd of June. Speaking of Ubisoft, let's talk about Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland. This is effectively Ubisoft's new spin on looter shooter format by adding survival elements. And this game will be free to play on PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and X, Xbox One, as well as PC. So what exactly do I mean by a looter shooter with survival elements? Well, effectively, when I say a looter shooter with survival aspects, is basically, well, your normal looter shooter, but the only survival aspects are things like, for example, dehydration, sickness, stuff like that that you have to deal with. So it's a pretty interesting take because a lot of looter shooters out there, for example, Marvel's Avengers or the recently delayed Kill the Justice League, they are basically just very generic looter shooters where you play your favorite character, you go around, farm the missions, and you just get better loot. Other than just getting better loot in, well, Division Heartland, you have to make sure that you can survive to use that loot, which I would say a pretty interesting concept. In any case, if any of you is interested in the game, you can actually register for the playtest right now and cross your fingers and hope that you are actually accepted into the next closed playtest. Moving on, let's talk about a pretty exciting moment, and it's the Steam Puzzle Fest. So Steam Puzzle Fest is basically a sale that is going on Steam that features a ton of puzzle games. Yes, you heard that correctly. So think of titles like Escape Academy, Escape Simulator, We Were Here Together, Inside, Portal, Portal 2. Yeah, some of these pretty good games that have been around for a long time, and all of these games have a sale going on right now. So if any of these particular games catches your eye and you always wanted to try it out but have always been waiting for a sale, now is the perfect time to get it. We're gonna talk about a pretty cool game from Devolver, and this game in question is KarmaZoo, a multiplayer / co-op game for up to 10 players. And this game is a platforming game that is also somewhat of a roguelike. Let me explain. So you have the general mode called loop mode, and this loop mode is basically a platforming mode where you have to play with potentially up to 9 other characters and you guys try to clear this puzzle together. Throughout this entire journey, you guys can play as different animals or different creatures and have different perks that help each other cross the finish line. So yeah, it's effectively a roguelike because each time you play the game, the perk will always be different, but at the same time, it's also a co-op game, which is pretty cool. And quite frankly, from what I saw thus far, you have up to 50 different characters that you can play as, which offers a lot of different possibilities. But hey, what if you don't want to play the loop mode? or you just want to have a pretty quick and fun time with some friends, then guess what? There is a totem mode where you can play with your friends in a PvP type of setting, and you basically just play various mini games against your friends. So yeah, and the best part is it supports cross-platform for both PC as well as consoles, including PS5, Xbox Series S and X, as well as Nintendo Switch. Anyway, that's all of the games that we are covering today. Next, let's talk about some games that you can grab your hands on this week, starting with After Image, available on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, as well as PC. So what is After Image? After Image is a Metroidvania-esque game with really beautiful graphics as well as really beautiful character design. In terms of combat, the game performs flawlessly, but only downside of the game is its story. Now, that's not to say that its story is lackluster, but the story is really confusing, which is unfortunately a pretty strong downside, because a lot of people actually like stories. I mean, most people that play single player games really just play it for the story. A strong story really does a lot of work, so if you really don't care about the story at all, then I would say that After Image is a game that you can actually enjoy a ton. But if story is key, then well, you might want to wait until maybe there's more updates for this game, then you can consider revisiting this game again later on in the future. Next, let's talk about another game called Live a Life, or Live a Live, I think, I'm not sure. So yeah, this game is actually originally on the Nintendo Switch, but it has now been ported over to PS5, as well as PS4, as well as PC. So this game is actually pretty interesting because if I recall correctly, I covered it in one of our previous episodes. In terms of the game itself, it's basically the predecessor of Octopath Traveler. It's the OG Octopath Traveler that was subsequently remaked into a more modern game, but in terms of the game itself is just a JRPG, but with a cast of 7 different characters instead of the 8 from Octopath. But what makes this game unique is that Live a Live is actually featuring 7 characters from different time periods. So you have some characters from the future, namely a robot, and you also have characters from the past, for example, cowboys and stuff like that, and even ninjas, which is pretty cool. So if you're just looking for another great JRPG like Octopath Traveler, I would say, hey, give Live a Live a shot, because guess what? It's the predecessor of Octopath Traveler, and if it got a remake, I'm pretty sure that it's a decent game that you can definitely enjoy. Now, let's move on to another release that I'll be covering today, and it's Star Wars Jedi Survivor, available on PS5, Xbox Series S and X, as well as PC. So yeah, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. What can I say? You guys have been waiting for this game for a really long time, and it's finally here. So in terms of the game itself, I'm really not gonna cover too much about it. It's effectively the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, because guess what? It features our main character Cal as he goes on to the good path. He's no longer working for the ways of evil, but instead he's working for the ways of the Jedi. So yeah, if you guys are interested in looking into Cal's redemption story, and of course a great game, then I highly recommend actually checking out Star Wars Jedi Survivors, because it is definitely gonna be a banger based on the previously amazing prequel Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, let's move on to our last and final title that we'll be covering this week. So this last and final title is not really a new game, but instead is an existing game that got a major update. And that title in question is Cult of the Lamb. So Cult of the Lamb recently got their first major update called Relics of the Old Faith, and it is now available for free for all players. Now let's talk about this new major update and what exactly this major update contains. So this new major update effectively covers a lot of things, including new abilities, new weapons, new heavy attacks, obviously new bosses, new characters, new campaigns. So basically like a brand new game, because they added a lot of post-game content. And Well, if you've never played Cult of the Lamb before, I actually suggest checking it out because the game itself is actually pretty cute, and aside from it being a roguelike, I forgot to mention that it's also somewhat of a base building game because, well, you have to manage your own cult and ensure that they don't turn on you. So yeah, it's overall a pretty interesting game that if you have never experienced it before or you happen to catch it on sale, then I highly suggest checking it out. Anyway, that's all the games that we have today. And next we move on to our last and final segment featuring free things. So this week, Epic Games Store is giving out 2 games. The first is Brief Edge, and the second one is Poker Club. So be sure to redeem these 2 games before it's no longer available. And that's all that I'm gonna cover for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and once again, I was your host Ming, and we hope to see you guys on next week's episode of Game Things.